The silver spoon in my hand trembled slightly, though my grip was steady. The porcelain bowl of soup steamed gently between us, giving off the scent of roasted garlic and betrayal. Across from me, Clarissa smiled. Not the smile of a loving wife, but the rehearsed expression of a woman who had already decided on something final. Her diamond earrings swayed as she tilted her head, watching me. "You're not eating," she said softly. I looked at her. Really looked. Her chestnut hair was pinned in an elegant updo, not a strand out of place. Her red lipstick, always the same shade, matched the wine she had poured into my glass. Her hands, always so poised, rested gently beside her spoon. The same hands that had signed my fate. "I was thinking," I said, and dipped the spoon into the broth. I brought it to my lips, and I drank. Her eyes didn't blink. That told me everything. She knew I knew. We sat in silence for nearly a minute. I could feel the heat of the soup sliding down my throat, my chest tightening with something I couldn't yet name. Was it fear? Or was it peace? I set the spoon down, gently, like it was made of glass. Then I looked at her. Why now? The smile faltered. She didn't expect a question. She expected denial, confusion, maybe a collapse, but not a question. She tilted her head again, this time slower. "I don't know what you mean." "Liar," I whispered, not because I wanted to insult her, but because it was the truth. It was the only word that fit between us now. The only word we hadn't pretended didn't exist. Her lips pressed together. Her fork paused over the salad she hadn't touched. She tried again. "Logan, what are you accusing me of?" Accusing? It was almost funny, but I wasn't laughing. "You poisoned it," I said flatly. "You laced the soup." She leaned back in her chair. Elegant, composed, cold. "You sound insane." "I probably am," I replied. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The chandelier above us flickered slightly. Or maybe it was my vision. I wasn't sure. I didn't care. "I know what you did," I said. "And I know you're wondering why I drank it anyway." Clarissa's gaze dropped, just for a moment, to the bowl in front of me. It was nearly empty now. "Maybe I'm just tired," I added. Her eyes snapped back to mine. "Or maybe," I continued, "I needed you to see me do it. I needed you to watch me drink what you made for me, and wonder why." The silence between us was louder than any scream. She was shaking, ever so slightly. Her fingers twitched. Her jaw clenched. She tried to regain composure. "You're imagining things," she said at last. I gave her a soft smile. It was the first real one I had worn in weeks. Am I? We both knew I wasn't. And for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in her eyes before. Fear. Not the fear of being caught. The fear of being understood. She stood, leaving the rest of her untouched meal behind. She walked out without a word, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step an echo of a marriage that had already died long ago. I sat alone with the soup, still warm, and waited to see if I would die. I used to believe in fate, not the grand, poetic kind that moves stars and splits oceans, no, the quieter kind, the kind that makes you walk into a bookstore 10 minutes later than planned, only to meet someone who will eventually destroy you. Clarissa had been standing in the travel section. She wore a cream coat that matched her skin tone, soft and elegant, like something out of a fashion spread. She was leafing through a guide to Tokyo. I remember that because she dropped it, and I picked it up for her. That was our first interaction. Her smile back then felt real. "I'm not really planning to go," she said, almost apologetically. "I just like to dream about places." I was 28 then, fresh out of grad school, drowning in student loans, and trying to keep my head above water as a freelance architectural designer. She was untouchable. Wealth radiated off her like perfume, subtle but unmistakable. She had a kind of poise I'd never seen in someone my age. We got coffee, then lunch. Then I found myself waiting for her texts like a fool starving for scraps. Clarissa always knew how to pace things. She never rushed, never begged. She allowed me to feel like I was chasing her, while in truth she was leading me exactly where she wanted. I should have seen the red flags. I should have noticed the way she watched people more than she spoke to them, the way she asked questions but gave little in return, the way her compliments always came with tiny, invisible hooks. But I was a man in love, and a man in love doesn't see a trap when the walls are made of gold. After 6 months, she invited me to meet her father, a real estate tycoon named Everett Langley, who treated me like a waiter who had sat down at the table without permission. The dinner was quiet, tense. Clarissa just smiled the whole time like we were at a theater performance, only she understood. "He has potential," she told him at the end of the meal. I wasn't sure if she was talking to him or about me. A year later, we were married in a vineyard in Napa. I wore a suit that cost more than my car. She wore silence like a veil. I didn't know who I was marrying. I only knew how she made me feel, like I had been chosen, like I had passed some invisible test, like I was being given access to a life no one in my family had ever tasted. But access came at a price. It started slowly. She'd suggest I not take certain clients. "They don't look right on your portfolio," she'd say casually. I agreed. Then she offered to help with my branding, hired an agency, paid for it herself. "You're wasting your talent working with low-end contracts," she'd say. It sounded like love, like support. But she was reshaping me. By our second anniversary, I didn't recognize my own work. My studio was filled with luxury projects I didn't care about. Modern kitchens for people who would never cook, rooftop spas I would never use. But I was making money. I was making her proud, and I was slowly erasing myself. Then came the parties. She hosted them weekly. Always people with names I couldn't pronounce or faces I only knew from headlines. Actors, lawyers, heirs, and me, her quiet accessory introduced as my husband Logan. He's an architect. I smiled. I nodded. I drank. And I learned to disappear in full view. One night, maybe 2 years ago, I found Clarissa in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, writing something in a leather notebook. She didn't hear me come in. When I asked what she was doing, she looked at me with a softness I now know was rehearsed. "Just thoughts," she said. "You know me." No, I didn't, but I pretended I did. That's what our marriage was, pretending. A polished performance built on omissions and illusions. And when the pretending stopped, when I finally looked her in the eye across that dinner table and asked, "Why now?" I think something shattered inside her, because she realized the mask was no longer working. And once a mask stops working, a woman like Clarissa only has one option left: destruction. There's a moment in every relationship, a shift, subtle and almost unnoticeable, where things stop being equal. For me, it was the night I found her phone vibrating under the sheets. We never kept secrets back then. Or rather, I didn't. Clarissa was always curated. She allowed me to see exactly what she wanted, no more, no less. And in those early days, I was grateful for the pieces she gave me. That night, she was in the shower. I was scrolling through my emails when her phone lit up beside me. Not once, not twice. 7 messages in a row, all from someone named Evan. I'm not proud of what I did next. But love makes you weak. Love makes you curious. I opened them. Evan, wish you were here instead of him. Evan, still can't believe you went through with it. Evan, he has no idea, does he? Evan, when can I see you again? And the one that twisted something in my chest. Evan, I miss your mouth. I sat still, breathing through my teeth, trying not to let the sound of the water drown me. By the time she stepped out, wrapped in a towel and humming softly, I was back on my laptop, but I wasn't reading anymore. She leaned over, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "You're always working." I looked up and smiled. So did she. That smile, so elegant, so empty. I didn't confront her. Not that night, not the next. I waited. I watched. I told myself I needed proof. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid of being right. Clarissa had the kind of personality that didn't allow confrontation to feel like justice. If I had accused her, she would have turned it around. She would have cried. She would have gaslighted me until I felt insane. She would have whispered things like, "How could you not trust me? And do you really think so little of me?" And I would have apologized. So I did nothing. Weeks passed. I began noticing more. Subtle shifts in tone, missing hours, sudden business trips that didn't align with her calendar. Once, she returned from a supposed charity event smelling like cigarette smoke. Clarissa never smoked. But Evan did. I saw a tagged photo of him once at a gallery opening, holding a lit cigar like it was a trophy. Still, she never broke character. Not once. I envied her for that. Her ability to lie with grace, to weaponize softness. It was like watching a predator disguised as porcelain. I started drinking more. Small things. A nightcap here, a heavier pour there. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She wanted me numbed, disoriented, quiet, and I gave her what she wanted. Until the night she left her notebook out. Clarissa was meticulous. Nothing personal ever stayed out in the open. But that night, maybe she was tired. Maybe she thought I'd passed out on the couch. Either way, she forgot it on her desk. A smooth, leather-bound journal. No lock, just temptation. I opened it. I expected to find quotes, dreams, plans for the future. What I found instead were lists, names, dates, symbols I didn't recognize, and one sentence, scribbled and underlined, "He would drink it if I asked. He always would." I closed the book gently. She found it back in place the next morning, said nothing. Neither did I. From that moment, I started playing a different game. I played the devoted husband. I kissed her hand at parties. I refilled her wine. I complimented her dresses and her friends and her fake plans. I followed her cues like a trained performer. But every smile I returned was hollow, and every touch I gave was poisonless revenge. I stopped wondering if she would kill me, and started wondering when. Clarissa had always kept her personal effects minimal. One phone, one purse, one laptop. She hated clutter, said it made her feel less clean. It was part of her brand, that curated coldness, minimalism as performance. So when I found the second phone, I knew she'd made a mistake. It was tucked inside the lining of one of her designer handbags, the kind no one actually uses, just keeps on display. The bag had fallen off its glass shelf while the maid was dusting, and when I went to pick it up, I noticed the seam inside was slightly open, not torn, just pulled back. The phone was matte black, no case, cheap, burnable. It didn't even have a fingerprint lock, just a simple 4-digit code. I tried her birthday, didn't work. Then I tried mine. It opened. That told me everything. It meant I was still part of her game. The screen was nearly empty. No social apps. Just call logs, a private photo gallery, and a voice recorder app. There were 3 recordings. I didn't even breathe as I pressed play on the first. Her voice filled the room. "Clarissa, he's too easy. It's almost boring. Like watching a moth keep flying into a lamp, not realizing the heat is what's killing it." Silence. Then a male voice. Smooth, smug. Male voice. "So when's the final act?" Clarissa laughed. It wasn't the laugh she used at charity galas or garden parties. This one was real. Mean. "Clarissa, he'll drink it. He always does." The blood drained from my face. I played it again. And again. By the 3rd time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was cold, mechanical, focused. The second recording was shorter, muffled. It sounded like it was taken in a car. "Clarissa, if this goes wrong, I'm not taking the fall." Male voice. "It won't. Just follow the schedule." Schedule. That word stuck with me. The 3rd recording was corrupted, static. But I heard a phrase slip through the distortion like a blade between ribs. "Clarissa, he'll be gone by Christmas." It was September. I put the phone back where I found it, careful to position it exactly as before. The maid had seen it drop. If it disappeared now, Clarissa might grow suspicious. I couldn't afford that yet. For the rest of the week, I moved like a ghost with a map. I smiled when she kissed my cheek. I nodded when she discussed party seating. I even complimented her new perfume, the one she only wore when she was planning something. And at night, I stared at myself in the mirror. There was a man I didn't recognize anymore. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders tense, his smile forced. But under the fatigue, something else had taken root. Resolve. Clarissa had built herself a perfect narrative: a grieving widow, a husband with a drinking problem, a series of medical issues no one had bothered to verify. But now I had recordings. Proof. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving her. I was preparing. The morning after I listened to those files, I left the house under the excuse of visiting a supplier for a new project. I didn't go to any supplier. I went to a lawyer, not to file anything, not yet, just to ask quiet questions. What if a wife tried to harm her husband, but he had no visible injuries? What if there were recordings? What if she was rich, connected, and cold? The lawyer, a man named Grant Delaney, didn't flinch. He just leaned forward and said, "Then you better start writing your will." I chuckled. "I already did," I said. "She thinks she's in it." And then I left. When I got home, Clarissa was in the garden, pruning roses with gloves that matched her smile. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Efficient," I said. "They had everything I needed." She tilted her head. "I bet they did." That night I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering what it felt like to sleep soundly when you were the one holding the knife. You can't confront evil when it's wearing perfume and pearls. You make a deal with it. You smile at it. You sit beside it at dinner. You give it everything it wants, right up until the moment you take everything it has. That was the deal I made with madness. The morning after I visited Grant Delaney, I walked into the kitchen like nothing had changed. Clarissa was already there, slicing strawberries into perfect geometric pieces like she was prepping food for a magazine shoot. She looked up, gave me her usual mechanical warmth. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." She poured. I watched her hands. Steady, controlled, not a tremble. I realized something then. She wasn't afraid of me, not even a little, because she didn't think I was capable of fighting back. She thought I was still the man who used to apologize for asking questions, the man who once cried in the guest room after she humiliated him in front of her friends, and then laughed about it over champagne. But that man was gone. I thanked her for the coffee, I kissed her cheek, and I meant none of it. The plan had begun. That week, I returned to Delaney's office under the pretense of designing the interiors of his firm's expansion. He played along. We discussed nothing illegal, only hypotheticals. If a man believed his wife was planning to harm him but couldn't yet prove it publicly, what could he do to protect himself? Delaney leaned back, tapping his pen on the desk. "Record everything, digitally, physically, cloud backups, redundancy. You'll need a trail so deep even the devil couldn't erase it." I nodded. "Done." "And the will?" he asked. "Almost done." "And her motive?" "Obvious," I said. "Money. She's changed the beneficiaries in her father's trust. I confirmed it last year. If I die before December 31st, she inherits $2.3 million in transitional stock." Delaney didn't blink. "That's a motive," he said. That afternoon, I installed 3 hidden audio devices in our home, one in the bedroom, one in her study, and one in the dining room. The soup was just the start. If she was planning to kill me, I needed every step of it on tape. Clarissa, to her credit, was as flawless as ever. She still smiled the same way when she laughed at my stories. Still wore white when we had guests, like she was the innocent one. Still brushed her fingers across my shoulder before heading upstairs each night, like a wife from an old movie. And I played my role just as perfectly. I gave her nothing to question, no anger, no coldness, just obedience. But beneath the surface, I was writing emails to a private investigator. I was collecting receipts, tracking her car with a magnetic GPS I'd placed under her rear bumper. And then, it happened. Thursday night. She left the house in a black dress she hadn't worn since our anniversary. Said it was a gallery opening. 30 minutes after she left, the tracker showed her at a private condo downtown. The PI I'd hired was already waiting there with a camera. When I got the photos an hour later, there was no shock, just silence. Clarissa, in that black dress, smiling, with him, the man from the audio recording. Not Evan, someone else. A tall, clean-cut man with expensive taste and a politician's smile. I didn't know his name. Not yet, but his arm around her waist told me everything. Back home, she returned with the smell of perfume and red wine on her skin. "Good night?" I asked. She smiled, taking off her earrings one by one in the mirror. "Lovely," she said. "You should have come. But I suppose it wasn't really your scene." "No," I said. "Probably not." That night I reviewed the audio from the dining room. Silence. Then her voice. "Clarissa. He's starting to take vitamins again. Could be getting suspicious." Male voice. "Then we accelerate. No loose ends." Accelerate. The word echoed in my skull. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was moving. So I did too. I scheduled another meeting with Delaney. I started opening a trust in my sister's name, someone Clarissa had alienated years ago, and I prepared my backup, an insurance file, hidden, protected, labeled, open if found dead. The game wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about winning. Clarissa thrived in settings where control was unspoken. Dinner parties, galas, wine tastings hosted in glass-walled towers. She didn't dominate conversations. She curated them. Every laugh, every anecdote, every compliment was a carefully selected thread in the tapestry she wove for everyone watching. And I had always been her favorite accessory, until tonight. The Langley Foundation's autumn benefit was being held at the Bellwood estate, all marble floors and manicured hedges, the kind of place where billionaires came to congratulate each other for pretending to care. Clarissa had been planning this evening for months. Her name was on the program. Her face was in the brochure. Her speech was scheduled for precisely 8:30. She wore a crimson gown. I wore the charcoal suit she had chosen for me. As always, we looked like perfection, but this time, I had come to fracture it. We entered the ballroom to scattered applause, not for us, but for the orchestra warming up in the corner. Still, Clarissa beamed as if the applause were hers. She tightened her grip on my arm as we made the rounds. "Senator Kessler, so lovely to see you again. Christina, that dress is absolutely divine. Logan's been working on something very special, haven't you, darling?" I smiled at them all, but inside I was already picturing the moment that would come later. We passed her father, Everett Langley, standing near the bar like a monument to old money and contempt. He barely glanced at me. I could feel Clarissa's hand tighten slightly on my elbow. She always felt more fragile around him, even if she'd never admit it. His approval still mattered. Perfect. At 8:30, she took the stage. The lights dimmed, the crowd hushed, and Clarissa launched into her speech with the grace of a seasoned diplomat. "I believe in legacy," she said, eyes gleaming. "Not just what we leave behind in wealth, but in impact." As she spoke, I moved to the side of the room near the bar. I could see Everett watching her, arms crossed, unimpressed. When her speech ended and applause rose, I stepped forward and said just loud enough to be heard, "Clarissa always did know how to speak other people's words." The applause faltered, just slightly, heads turned. Clarissa blinked, her perfect posture freezing for a split second. I saw it, the smallest tremor in her eye. A muscle in her cheek clenched. She recovered quickly, smiling toward me. "My husband is always my greatest critic," she said sweetly. "But also your biggest witness," I replied. Another silence, this one deeper. Everett Langley stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. We moved on, and I acted as though nothing had happened. But I knew Clarissa felt it. That night back home, she didn't speak to me as we undressed. She didn't ask what I meant, which told me everything. She was calculating, not reacting. Good. Let her wonder. The next morning, she scheduled a brunch with the same man she had met in the condo. I had his face. Now I needed a name. The private investigator delivered it by sunset. Colton Nash, former political consultant, fired from a campaign scandal involving misused donor funds, reputation swept clean thanks to a discreet settlement, connected, ambitious, disgraced, exactly her type. The PI also confirmed what I suspected. Clarissa and Colton had a shared bank account under a shell corporation based in Nevada. Buried within the LLC, real estate, withdrawals, a secured safe deposit box. They weren't just having an affair, they were building something. Or ending someone. Me. That night I sat across from her at dinner. No soup this time. Just roasted chicken and silence. "Do you ever regret anything?" I asked quietly. She looked up from her wine. "Excuse me?" "Anything," Us. The things we never said. The things we're still hiding. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're being dramatic. I've been around you too long not to be. She set her glass down. What are you fishing for, Logan? I leaned forward slightly. Your honesty. She laughed. That's not something I give for free. No, I said. But it's something I'll take eventually. We stared at each other, knives still clean on the table, but already bloodied in meaning. I went to bed with the sound of her laughter echoing in my head. But she never heard what I heard. The conversation she had later that night in her study. Clarissa, whispering, he knows something. Not everything, but he's different. Colton, on speaker, do we need to move the date? Clarissa, no, just make sure it looks like an accident. I paused the recording, rewound it, listened again, just make sure it looks like an accident. And that, finally, was her mistake. She wasn't afraid of me before, but now, she would start to be, because the man she thought she'd caged was already outside the bars. There's something cruel about realizing you weren't the first. Not the first lover, that's expected, but the first victim, the first man she used. Broke, discarded. Clarissa's sins didn't start with me. I found out the truth through a phone call I almost didn't answer. It came from a blocked number just after midnight. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Logan Hartley? The voice was male, rough, wary. Speaking. There was a pause, then a slow exhale. You don't know me, but I knew your wife, a long time ago, back when she was still Clarissa Langley, not Clarissa Nash. That name hit like a hammer. Nash? I repeated. You mean Colton Nash? No, he said. Before him, she was married. Briefly. It never made the papers because Everett paid to bury it. But I was there. I was him. His name was Benjamin Cross, a real estate investor based in Denver. 10 years ago, he'd met Clarissa at a luxury expo in Aspen. They married 6 months later, divorced in less than a year. She poisoned me, he said flatly. Not enough to kill, just enough to make me think I was dying. I checked into clinics. She said she'd take care of everything. Within 6 months, she had full power of attorney. Transferred most of my liquid assets to joint investments. Then disappeared. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone until my knuckles whitened. Why are you telling me this now? Because someone I used to work with sent me an article. It had a photo of the two of you. I recognized the eyes, the posture. I looked closer and realized you were me, just cleaner, richer, still breathing. I don't know how much longer I'll be either. Benjamin laughed bitterly. Then listen to me. She'll let you think you have control. Then she'll pull the rug out so fast you'll think you jumped. Don't play hero, Hartley. She doesn't leave loose ends. After we hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. Clarissa had done this before. It wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about the pattern, the game. She used marriage like a syringe, filled it with charm, injected herself into your world, then watched as the poison seeped in slowly, not to kill you all at once, but to rot you from the inside. Love was just the sweet-tasting casing. I found the marriage license from Denver buried in an old public record request. Her maiden name had been restored after the annulment, but the timeline matched. Clarissa had erased that history from her public narrative. But now I had a copy. I scanned it, uploaded it to the same encrypted drive that now held hours of audio and screenshots of her financial schemes. Then I added something new to the folder. A photo of her and Colton, arm in arm, from the charity gala last spring. She had told everyone I was traveling for work that night. She had worn my absence like a widow's shawl. And there she was, smiling with her next mark. I stared at that photo for a long time. And finally, I understood the full scope of her game. Clarissa didn't just want my money, or my death. She wanted my erasure. She wanted to write me out of the story before it even ended. The next morning, I visited Delaney again. I need you to prepare something, I said. A will? No, I said. A living truth. He raised an eyebrow. That's not legal terminology. It is now. Delaney leaned forward. You're preparing for a very public war, aren't you? I'm preparing for the story she'll tell about me after I'm gone. We went over details for over 2 hours. Timelines, secure handoffs, a public release mechanism in case I disappear under suspicious circumstances. The folder would go to journalists, police, and Everett Langley himself, especially Everett. Because I had begun to suspect something. Clarissa hadn't inherited her ruthlessness from her father. She had learned it by trying to survive him. The next night, I invited Everett to dinner. Alone. Clarissa was not pleased. Since when do you and my father have anything to discuss? She asked, voice tight. I thought it was time, I said. We've known each other for years, haven't we? Her eyes narrowed. Be careful, Logan. He's not someone you want to be on the wrong side of. I smiled. Neither are you. She didn't say another word that night. Everett arrived exactly on time. No smile, no handshake, just a nod. We sat outside in the garden. The weather was cold enough to keep the staff away. I'm not here for pleasantries, he said. Say what you have to say. So I did. I told him about the recordings, the second phone, the man, the bank account, the poison, the pattern. And then I slid the envelope across the table. Inside it, copies of everything. He didn't touch it, just stared at me. You expect me to believe all this? He asked. No, I said. I expect you to see it, because you raised her. He looked away for a moment, then finally opened the envelope. 5 minutes later, he closed it. His expression never changed, but something in his voice did. She's not a woman who loses, he said. If you're planning to beat her, I'm not, I interrupted. I'm planning to survive her. He stood. Without another word, he left. And I sat alone with the truth. Clarissa didn't just poison the soup. She poisoned love. It started with a knock at the door. Not the main gate. Not the service entrance. The actual front door. No one ever used it anymore. Not even Clarissa. It was a Sunday afternoon. Clarissa was out. A supposed spa day with her friends, though the GPS on her phone said she was parked outside a Westwood law firm. Probably updating the will I didn't know about. I opened the door and found myself face to face with a ghost. Benjamin Cross. He looked nothing like the man I'd imagined on the phone. No bitterness in his posture. No anger in his eyes. Just exhaustion. The kind that settles into a man's bones and refuses to leave. You sure you want to come in? I asked. He nodded. I wouldn't have knocked otherwise. He stepped into the foyer and I shut the door behind him like sealing a tomb. We sat in the study. I poured bourbon. He didn't thank me. Just took the glass and stared at the fireplace. I haven't been in this house in over a decade, he said finally. It's changed. She changes everything, I replied. Benjamin looked at me. And keeps the things she plans to destroy. We drank in silence. He pulled out a small envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Inside were photos. Grainy, but damning. Clarissa and Colton. Together, years ago. Wait, I said, flipping through them. This was before she met me. Benjamin nodded. She didn't just meet him recently. He was part of her exit strategy from me too. I blinked. She was already grooming him back then? I asked. She keeps people on the sidelines like insurance, he said. Loyal, desperate men. She breaks them down and builds them into exactly what she needs. Tools. I swallowed hard. She said Colton was a recent mistake. She lies, Benjamin said flatly. It's what she's best at. I leaned back, letting it sink in. Why are you helping me? I asked. You don't know me. You owe me nothing. He stared at the flames. She made me question my sanity. I spent 6 months thinking I was sick. I watched my business crumble, my friends disappear. My own parents asked me if I was okay. She didn't just try to kill me, Logan. She erased me. You're fighting back. I didn't. And now? Benjamin's mouth twisted. Now I want to see her fall, even if I have to watch it from the shadows. I opened my laptop and added the photos to the encrypted drive. The story was coming together, not just as defense, but as prosecution. Clarissa hadn't just plotted to kill me. She'd done it before. We worked together for hours, mapping timelines, comparing dates, tracing payments. Benjamin had bank records, notes from a neurologist, email trails. She'd isolated him, convinced his colleagues he was mentally unstable, then sold off assets behind his back, assets that were conveniently transferred into shell corporations later connected to Colton Nash. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a system. "She's accelerating," I said. "I've heard her say it. She wants this done before Christmas." Benjamin nodded. "She likes symbolism, holidays. It makes the narrative clean." "And Everett?" I asked. "Did he help her with you?" Benjamin paused. "No. He warned me to stay away from her. Said she was her mother's daughter." I didn't listen. He paid me to disappear after the divorce. Not to cover her, but to protect the family name. I think part of him always knew. That changed something in me. Everett hadn't protected her. He'd contained her, and now the container was cracked. Before Benjamin left, I walked him to the door. "She'll come for you again," I said, "if she finds out you helped me." "I'm not afraid anymore," he replied. "She already took everything." I watched him leave, disappearing down the long driveway like a man walking back into his own grave. Later that night, Clarissa returned. She was calm, rehearsed. "How was your day?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. We had dinner in silence. Then she looked up, smiling faintly. "You've been busy lately." "Work," I said. "Deadlines." "You're always so focused lately. It's impressive. Isn't that what you wanted?" Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, and I knew. She sensed it. Something had shifted. Her pawn had moved. But the board was mine now. Clarissa Langley had always believed in one thing: control, not dominance. That was messy, loud, desperate. Control was cleaner. You didn't force people to obey you. You let them believe it was their idea. She sat in the center of the walk-in closet, surrounded by perfectly spaced gowns and polished Italian heels, holding a small, unassuming photograph in her hand. It was old, faded at the edges, of her mother, Vivian Langley. Elegant, detached, cruel in a way that was never overt. Clarissa had been 13 when she realized her mother didn't love anyone. Not really. Vivian had once told her, after a particularly icy silence at dinner, "If you ever find yourself being pitied, you've already lost." Clarissa never forgot that. She folded the photo back into the leather case she kept under her jewelry drawer. Not because she missed her mother, but because she needed to remember what built her. She could feel the shift in Logan. That part wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. Men were easy to read when you stopped pretending they were complex. He smiled less now, asked more questions. He wasn't drinking at night. He had stopped flinching when she touched his shoulder. He was becoming dangerous. That made him interesting again. Clarissa had never actually hated Logan. That was the irony. She had chosen him, not because he was weak, but because he was useful. Sharp, clean, moldable. He had a kind of dignity that hadn't yet been broken by legacy or greed. He was her most successful experiment. And now, he was misbehaving. She stared into the vanity mirror, carefully adjusting a diamond earring. If he truly suspected her, he'd already be gone. She knew how fear looked on a man's face. This wasn't fear. It was something else. A plan. She opened her email. Deleted the anonymous message she'd received 2 nights ago. A photo of her and Colton, time-stamped, taken from across the street. The subject line read, "Still smiling, Clarissa?" That meant it wasn't Logan. He wasn't petty. It was someone else. She didn't like unknown variables. She had kept her circle tight for a reason. Colton was manageable. He loved feeling dangerous. He didn't realize he was just a weapon she'd been sharpening for years. She liked him more than most, actually. He knew how to obey without begging for praise. But even he had been slipping lately, asking questions, looking nervous, talking about risk. Risk is weakness, she thought. And weakness is betrayal, just waiting to ripen. She pulled open her notebook. The original one, the first she'd used when she was with Benjamin. Back then, she'd been more impulsive. The poison had been too slow, her moves too theatrical. But now she was art. If Logan had been poisoned, truly poisoned, he would have already felt it. She hadn't followed through. Not yet. Not because she doubted herself, but because the story wasn't ready. She had worked too hard building the final act, the sympathetic widow, the crumbling marriage, the charitable donations, the grief. And now? Now she sensed it slipping. She blamed her father. Everett had been cold to her lately, not overtly, but enough. She'd seen the hesitation in his eyes at the autumn benefit, the pause before introducing her to the senator, the withheld compliment. And Logan had been there. She turned on the voice recorder she'd planted in the study. It was silent now, but she knew Colton's voice was still stored on it. She would make sure he said the right things soon. If Logan was collecting proof, she would bury it in noise. Let the world wonder who was lying. Let the story splinter until no one could see the truth through the cracks. She wasn't the villain. She was the survivor of men who tried to control her, break her, leave her. She had never killed anyone, not directly. She didn't need to. Men self-destructed when they felt out of control. All she had to do was guide them toward the edge. Benjamin had been dramatic. He had begged, cried. Logan wouldn't. He was colder, which meant he was going to make this harder, which made it fun. Clarissa closed the notebook and lit a stick of cedarwood incense. If he wanted a war, he should have declared it sooner. Because she wasn't going to kill him. She was going to ruin him. And when he begged for peace, for truth, she would lean in and whisper the line she'd written in every journal since she was 13. If they want to win, make them think it was their idea to lose. There's a different kind of silence in a room full of people who have just realized they've been lied to. It doesn't roar. It tightens. It coils around the air, waiting to see who breaks first. That's the silence that fell across the ballroom the moment Clarissa's voice filled the speakers. Not the polished version from her speech, but the recorded version, captured in a low whisper, played over the event's sound system like a ghost's confession. Clarissa, on recording. Just make sure it looks like an accident. The Langley Foundation's Winter Gala was supposed to be her masterpiece. Her finale. The invitations were engraved. The guest list was exclusive. The media was there. This was the moment she would cement herself as the grieving philanthropist, the woman who endured a broken marriage with grace and came out shining. Instead, it became a stage for collapse. I watched her from the back of the room. She stood frozen at the podium, eyes flickering as her own voice continued on the speakers. Clarissa. He's starting to take vitamins again. Could be getting suspicious. Gasps. A woman dropped her wine glass. Everett Langley closed his eyes. I stepped forward, microphone in hand. Apologies, I said calmly. That wasn't part of the scheduled presentation, but I thought it was relevant. All eyes turned to me. Clarissa didn't move. Some of you know me only as Clarissa's husband. Others may know me as the architect who quietly vanished from industry events over the last year. I've been sick, or so we were told. I held up a flash drive. This contains audio recordings, bank records, and a pattern of control, poison, and fraud, one that didn't start with me and wasn't going to end with me. Clarissa finally found her voice. This is slander, she said, sharp and breathless. I turned to her. Is it? I asked. Then by all means, explain the voice on this file. Explain Colton Nash. Explain Benjamin Cross. Her jaw tensed. I'm calling security, she hissed. You should, I said. They're going to want to see this too. Colton was in the crowd, standing near the back, pale, sweating. His eyes darted, not at me, but at her. She noticed. You told me this was handled, she said to him. He didn't respond. She stepped down from the stage, heels echoing too loudly against the marble floor. You humiliated me, she whispered when she reached me. I leaned closer. You were going to kill me, I replied. I think we're even. Reporters were already moving through the room, filming, guests whispering, phones lifted. It wasn't the police that would take her down. It was the narrative. Clarissa moved toward the exit, head high, but her hands trembled. She still thought she could spin this, still thought she could walk out clean. I turned to the crowd one last time. If anyone has ever questioned whether the people you admire are the people you should trust, I offer myself as an answer. And then I walked out. Behind me, Clarissa's world collapsed. She tried, of course. She scheduled an emergency press conference the next morning, standing in front of a stark white wall, tears perfectly placed. "My husband is unwell," she said. "He's been suffering emotionally. I never wanted any of this public." But the recordings had already leaked. Benjamin's story was already circulating. And Colton? He flipped. He came forward that afternoon with a lawyer and turned over emails, texts, receipts. He called Clarissa a manipulative genius with no conscience. She lost the foundation board by evening. Everett Langley released a single statement. "My daughter's actions are her own." That was all he said, and it was more than enough. By midnight, the stock tied to her charitable holdings had been frozen. 2 days later, subpoenas followed. And I watched it all unfold from a quiet cabin outside Lake Placid. No press, no police, no noise, just silence and peace. But it wasn't over yet because Clarissa didn't scream, she didn't cry, she didn't break. Not yet. She did something worse. She disappeared. 3 days after the collapse, she was gone. No trail, no cameras, no cards used. Colton didn't know. Her father didn't know. No one knew. And that's what terrified me most. Because a woman like Clarissa doesn't run, unless she's planning to return. They say revenge is best served cold. But I didn't serve mine cold. I slow-cooked it. The world saw the winter gala meltdown as a man pushed to the brink, an outburst from a husband who finally had enough. But that night was never a reaction. It was an execution. It began 4 months ago, the day I found the second phone. The night I played those first recordings on a loop until the rage numbed into clarity. That was when the real plan began, not to survive Clarissa, but to rewrite her ending. I couldn't kill her. That would be too fast. I had to undo her. I had 3 goals: take away her reputation, cut off her legacy, make sure she never felt safe again. And for that, I needed more than evidence. I needed timing. I built it in layers. First, I planted the seeds, photos with Colton, emails, accounts linked to their shell company. Quietly leaked to a journalist who specialized in financial scandals. I told him only this: "You'll want to publish the rest the night of the Langley Gala." He agreed. He didn't ask questions. He knew a story when he saw one. Next, I went to Everett. People think I showed him the evidence to beg for help. But I didn't go for help. I went for permission. I told him, "When this all comes down, you'll be asked to choose between her and the Langley name. I need to know where you'll land." He didn't answer me directly. But the next morning I received a package at my studio, an envelope with an offshore ledger inside. Clarissa's name, Colton's name, transfers going back over a year. And at the bottom, a note in Everett's crisp handwriting: "Let the house fall." So I kept building. I hired a voice engineer to authenticate the recordings, just in case she tried to discredit them. I hired a second investigator to follow Colton, collect habits, timestamps, flaws. And I did one final thing, something no one knew about. I found an old friend from Clarissa's prep school days. Her name was Renee Dalton, now a quiet book editor in Vermont. She didn't want to talk to me at first. I flew out there anyway. "I know what she did to you," I said. "I know she made you the villain." Renee cried. And then she talked. High school, college, early business moves. Clarissa had a pattern, a long one. She didn't just destroy romantic partners, she hollowed out anyone who threatened her narrative. Renee's story wasn't criminal, but it was haunting. So I asked her one thing. "Will you be in the audience?" She agreed. At the gala, when the audio played, she stood near the cameras. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She wanted to see the fall. And the public? They didn't just see betrayal, they saw pattern. That was the key. Anyone can be framed once. But when the past repeats itself, the illusion crumbles. The press didn't just call Clarissa a disgraced socialite. They called her a blueprint in manipulation. Even her defenders backed away slowly. Because defending her wasn't just risky, it became embarrassing. And when she disappeared, they didn't pity her. They assumed guilt. They assumed shame. And quietly, they moved on. I didn't. I moved to Lake Placid for a reason. It wasn't escape. It was staging. Because the plan wasn't just to ruin her now. It was to make sure she never recovered. I knew she'd run. She wouldn't face court. She wouldn't risk prison. She would vanish. But vanishing isn't freedom, not when the world has a memory. And I made sure they did. I donated Clarissa's journals, redacted and digitized, to a women's advocacy group. Not to shame her, but to expose the manipulation, the psychological control tactics. They turned it into a training series. Her voice, her words, used to protect people. She hated being studied more than she hated being ignored. Next, I gave Benjamin control of the public file repository. He set up a website, the Langley File, a resource, a story, an open wound, and one by one other voices started sending in their own stories. Not about Clarissa, but about people like her. She wanted to disappear, but now she was immortalized, not as the woman she crafted, but as the shadow she cast. I still sleep with the bedroom door locked. I don't expect peace. I never did. But sometimes at night, I think of her. Not with hatred, not even with fear, just with a single question playing like static in the back of my mind. Where is she now? Because Clarissa Langley doesn't die. She waits, she watches, she plans, just like I did. But the difference? I already made peace with losing. That's what let me win. It started with a scent, faint, familiar, jasmine and cedar. I hadn't smelled it in months, not since she left, not since she vanished from cameras, accounts, and credit card trails like smoke fading into a storm. But when I opened the package, it was the first thing I noticed, the smell. It clung to the thick paper inside the manila envelope, like a fingerprint made of perfume. No return address, no postage stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it to my P.O. box upstate. Inside there was only one item, a menu, from our wedding reception. The original one, printed on ivory cardstock with raised gold lettering. A keepsake I hadn't seen in years. She had written something across it in red ink, looping and elegant. You still don't understand what the soup was for. I stood there holding it for a long time. Then I flipped it over. There, taped to the back, was a memory card. I didn't plug it in at the cabin. I went into town, into a public library, and used one of the old desktop terminals where no trace could be left behind. The files were organized in a single folder. Final ingredient. There were 3. One was a video, one was an audio file, one was a PDF. I opened the PDF first. It was a recipe, not a real one, more like a metaphor. A list of ingredients. 1 man, proud. 1 house, cold. 1 truth, buried. 1 taste, unforgettable. And at the bottom, in small print, only serve if he dares to finish it. I opened the audio file next. It was Clarissa's voice, clearer than ever. Clarissa, you were never supposed to die, Logan. That would have made you a martyr. I don't believe in martyrs. I believe in silence. Pause. Clarissa, I needed you to suffer, to question, to suspect, because when you doubt your own mind, no one else believes it either. She laughed then, quiet, controlled. Clarissa, but you never broke, did you? You surprised me. That's why I left. I don't chase victories. I curate them. Then the final line. Clarissa, but in case you're still wondering, the soup was never poisoned. I froze. All this time I had assumed she'd tried to kill me. I'd built an empire of retaliation, forged alliances, burned her legacy to the ground. And now she was telling me it had been a bluff. I didn't believe her. Not fully. But that was the point. Doubt. It was her weapon of choice. I clicked on the video file. It was grainy. Surveillance footage from my own home. An angle just above the dining room table. The night of the soup. She was in the kitchen, pouring the broth, stirring slowly. The camera zoomed in slightly, probably edited later. At one point, she reached under the counter, held something small, then hesitated, and placed it back. I watched it 3 times, frame by frame. Was it powder? A vial? Nothing? I couldn't tell. That was the brilliance. I would never know. She hadn't left a final weapon. She was the weapon. And now, even in hiding, she had forced me to ask the one question that would undo everything. What if she never crossed the line? What if I had? I left the library and drove straight to the old Langley estate. Everett hadn't spoken publicly since Clarissa vanished, but his staff still recognized me. He met me in the atrium, cold and formal as ever. "I got something," I told him. "From her." He didn't flinch. "She's not dead." I blinked. "You sound sure." "She doesn't leave bodies. She leaves legacies." I showed him the menu, the message, the memory card. He studied it without touching, then finally said, "Do you know why she left that with you? To remind me she's alive? To remind you she's still watching." I stood in silence, then asked the only thing that mattered. "Was the soup poisoned?" Everett smiled faintly. "I don't know," he said, "but I do know she kept the vial." "What vial?" "The one I gave her," he said softly. "For protection, after Benjamin." I swallowed hard. "She never used it?" "No." I exhaled. "So she chose not to kill me." He nodded. "That's worse," I said. He didn't disagree. I left the estate that night with one truth heavier than any evidence. She hadn't lost. She had left. And in doing so, she left me something worse than fear. She left me with doubt. I returned to the cabin, lit a fire, sat alone with the menu still scented faintly of jasmine and cedar, and in the flicker of the flames, I finally whispered it out loud. The soup was never poisoned. But the thought of it? That had been enough. Enough to make me fight. Enough to make me hate. Enough to become her. There are only a few questions in life that don't fade with time, and just one that can keep a man awake for the rest of his life. Did she ever love me? I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times in 1,000 variations. Quietly, loudly, in the dark, in public, through clenched teeth, through trembling hands. But I never asked her. I didn't need to, until now. Because now, after all the lawsuits, the headlines, the silence, after the videos, the memories, the soup, I wasn't afraid of her answer anymore. I was afraid of what her silence meant. It was nearly 2 in the morning when my phone buzzed. No number. Just a voice. Her voice. "Come alone," she said. And then the line went dead. No address. No warning. But I didn't hesitate. I knew where she was. The Langley hunting cabin was a stone lodge at the edge of the old estate's farthest boundary. It hadn't been used in over 10 years. Not until now. I parked beneath the trees and walked the rest of the way, the cold wrapping around my chest like memory. I should have been afraid. But fear had long since been replaced by familiarity. The front door creaked open before I reached it. She stood there, Clarissa, alive, unchanged, but somehow dimmed, like the flame had pulled back from the wick. She wore black, simple and unadorned. Her face was bare, no makeup, no diamonds, no perfume. And yet I couldn't breathe. "Logan," she said softly, "I wondered if you'd still come when I called." "You don't wonder," I replied. "You plan." She stepped aside. I entered. The cabin was quiet, sparse. A single lamp lit the small room. No traps, no theatrics. Just a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. "You always preferred silence," she said. "No," I replied. "I just learned that noise didn't matter." She poured us each a drink, then sat across from me. No games, no smiles, just stillness. "You got what you wanted," I said. "Did I?" she asked. "You're a ghost, a myth. You burned your name into history and vanished." "That wasn't the plan," she said. "But it worked." She sipped, then looked at me, not with fire, not with hate, with something worse, with memory. "You know what no one ever asked me?" she said. "Not the journalists, not the prosecutors, not even my father." "What?" She leaned forward. "If I ever wanted to stop." I didn't speak. She shook her head. "They all think I'm some cold creature who can't feel, who calculates every breath. Maybe they're right. Maybe I was born this way. Or maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe it was easier than feeling anything at all." And there it was. The crack. The one thing she'd always hidden behind all the mirrors. Emotion. "I have one question," I said. She looked at me, calm, unreadable. "Did you ever love me?" It was the only question that mattered. The one that had lived in the soup, in the silence, In every step I took toward becoming a man I barely recognized. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she turned her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she stood, walked to the window. Her shoulders rose and fell once, like she was exhaling years. "Yes," she said. It was quiet, not defensive, not theatrical, not rehearsed. Just true. "Yes, Logan, I loved you." Then she turned. "And that's why I had to destroy you." The words didn't wound. They confirmed what I had always known in the marrow of my bones. "I didn't want to win," I said. "I just didn't want to lose to a lie." She sat again. "And what are we now?" she asked. "Two ghosts," I said, "wandering a house we burned together." A long silence. She poured us both more scotch. "I'm leaving the country tomorrow," she said. "New name, new city, no trail." I figured. "This is the last time we'll ever speak." I nodded, and then I reached into my coat and pulled out a recorder, set it gently on the table, pressed play. Her voice from moments ago echoed in the cabin. "Yes, Logan, I loved you." She blinked. No fear, just sadness. "I thought you already won," she whispered. "I don't care about winning," I replied. "I just needed you to say it." She stared at me, then stood again, walked toward the door. Before she opened it, she looked back once more. "If I ever come back," she said, "don't wait. End it." "I won't," I said, and I meant it. She disappeared into the night. I sat alone in that cabin for another hour, just breathing, and for the first time in years, the air didn't taste like war. It tasted like an ending. There's something strange about silence. When you've been living in noise for too long, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like waiting. 2 weeks had passed since the night at the cabin. No sightings, no hints, no headlines. Clarissa Langley had vanished again. This time it seemed for real. And yet, I hadn't felt freedom. Not the kind they show in movies, tears and laughter and sunlit windows. My version was quieter, routine, empty hours. But there was no more watching over my shoulder. No more questions whispered at night like curses. No more soup. I walked through my house differently now. Every object I touched, every room I entered, it felt like I was borrowing someone else's life. Because the life that had once been mine had never really belonged to me. It had been sculpted, framed, curated by her. She was gone. But her design lingered in the walls. I moved out 3 days later, didn't sell the place, just locked it up, let it sit there like a mausoleum, a museum of manipulation. I moved into a 1-bedroom near the waterfront. Nothing dramatic, nothing rich, just clean walls and silence that didn't try to trick me. Grant Delaney, my lawyer, called once a week to check in. He told me the courts were freezing assets Clarissa had left behind. No activity, no withdrawals, no signs of life. Everett Langley never called. I didn't expect him to. But I read a quiet headline in a local financial paper. Langley Holdings disbands. Charitable arm amid controversy. That was his way of erasing her, just like she erased everything else. And me? I started writing again. Not stories, not memoirs, just thoughts, lines, fragments of understanding, trying to piece together the parts of myself I'd buried to survive. I thought the world would want answers from me. They didn't. Clarissa was the story. I was the footnote. That was fine. Let her legacy rot in speculation. Let her name be a warning. But I kept the recording, the final one. Her voice, low and exhausted. "Yes, Logan, I loved you." I never played it for anyone else. Not the media, not the lawyers, not even Benjamin. Because some things aren't for justice. Some things are just scars you hold on to so you remember the pain was real. On the 10th morning in the new apartment, I made tea. Not coffee, not scotch, just something simple. I sat by the window and watched the street below. Joggers, couples, a woman walking a dog. Normal. It didn't scare me anymore. Later that week, I went to visit Renee Dalton, the one from Clarissa's past, the friend she'd tried to destroy in college. We sat in a bookstore cafe, talked for an hour. She asked me something unexpected. "Do you think she ever stops?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "No, but I think I did." Renee smiled. That's enough. I left that meeting lighter. Not healed, but unburdened. That night, I wrote a letter. To no one, for no one. Just a letter I needed to send into the world. Dear Clarissa, I hope wherever you are, you're living a life without mirrors. Because if you ever looked back now, I think even you would flinch. You didn't break me. You transformed me, not into a victim, not into a monster, but into someone who understands that love, when twisted, can taste like poison and still be swallowed whole. I forgive you, but I don't forget. And if one day you return to finish what you started, know this: I won't run, and I won't play. I'll just ask one question, and it will destroy you, just like you destroyed everything that once made you human. Logan, I burned the letter after I finished. Not because I feared her finding it, but because I didn't need it anymore. She may still be out there, changing names, changing faces, but she no longer owns mine. I am Logan Hartley, and for the first time in years, I am alone, and I am finally free. The sun rose quietly over the bay. I sat on my balcony, sipping tea that no longer tasted like suspicion. The city moved beneath me, unaware, uncaring. The story had ended for the world months ago. For me, it had just become background noise. I hadn't heard her name in weeks. It was almost disorienting. Even ghosts grow tired of haunting places that stop fearing them. But there was one final thread I had never pulled, one last page Clarissa hadn't written, and it arrived unexpectedly, on a Tuesday afternoon in a gray envelope. No return address. Inside, a deed and a key to a storage unit in a city I hadn't been to in over a decade, Seattle. It took me 2 days to convince myself it wasn't a trap. It took me 2 more to buy a flight and go anyway. The unit was in an underground facility on the edge of the industrial district. Cold, clean, the kind of place you'd store items you didn't want found, until you did. The key clicked in easily. Inside was only one thing: a chair and a box. The box was old, wooden, sanded down at the corners, as if someone had carried it through too many moves, too many lives. I opened it slowly. Inside, I found a Polaroid of us, laughing, from a time I barely remembered. Her wedding ring. The one she had insisted was custom, flawless. A flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop right there in the cold concrete silence. A single video file. She appeared on screen, calm, still, as if she'd filmed it in one take. Clarissa, if you're watching this, it means you're still trying to understand. I won't apologize. That's not who I am. But I want you to know one thing I never said out loud, because I couldn't risk believing it. She hesitated. You were the only thing I didn't plan. Not really. I thought I chose you because you were useful, because you were simple to control. But you weren't. You were kind. And I never learned how to live with kindness, only how to bend it, break it, or bury it. Her eyes looked away. You asked me once if I ever loved you. I said yes. I meant it. But I didn't say the other part. I loved you and I hated myself for it. Silence. Then a half smile, barely formed. This is not an ending. I don't believe in them. But it is a moment of truth. That's all I ever owed you. The video cut out. I sat there for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just breathing, and feeling the strangest thing I'd ever felt after her. Pity. Not for what she did, but for what she couldn't do. She couldn't stay, couldn't love cleanly, couldn't forgive herself. And when you can't do that, you can't ever let someone else love you honestly. I packed the box back up and left it in the unit. Let it stay buried. Some stories don't need more endings. They just need silence. Back home, I reopened my practice. Small, local, architecture for real people, not legacies, not foundations. Renee and I stayed in touch. Sometimes I wondered what might have been if we'd met under other circumstances. She had her own scars. We didn't try to heal each other. We just listened. Benjamin disappeared again. I didn't blame him. Colton wrote a book, turned victimhood into content. I skimmed the first chapter and never touched it again. Everett Langley died in silence. No statement, no obituary, just a legal notice and a sealed will. His empire split, repurposed, and eventually dismantled. And Clarissa? She remained a whisper. Rumors in art galleries, anonymous posts on dark forums, a woman spotted in Argentina with eyes too sharp, a boarding pass with no name. But I never chased any of it. I didn't need to find her anymore, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't lost. I didn't look over my shoulder when I walked into a room. I didn't second-guess every face at the grocery store. And when I made soup, I didn't think about poison. I just tasted it and let it be warm. People ask if you can ever recover from a person like her. I think the answer is no. You don't recover, you rebuild. You salvage what's left. You plant new things in the soil where something once rotted. And you hope that this time, it grows differently. Clarissa Langley never came back, but she lives in every word I never say, in every kindness I now give carefully, in every silence I no longer fear. She didn't just poison the soup, she poisoned the story. But she forgot one thing. Stories don't belong to the ones who start them, they belong to the ones who survive. And I did. I survived. And now, finally, I get to write the ending. I get to